Managing global supply chains has become one of the most challenging, risk-intensive aspects of just about any business. While the logistics crisis that rocked the past 3 years has now normalized, geopolitical issues are escalating. Key retail markets are uncertain at best, and then there's the increasing pressure to meet more stringent demands for transparency. Oh, and let's not forget about the ubiquitous price pressure that has always been a part of product sourcing. A growing number of people are looking to technology to create greater supply chain stability. However, even the most advanced technology is only a tool. The foundational strategies will come from the people who manage the sourcing operations which that technology is supporting. So then what could companies do to build more stable supply chains? And what might the new, more resilient supply chain look like? To find out, I invited Christophe Roussel to join us here on A Seat at the Table. Christophe has over 30 years' experience building, shaping, and transforming consumer goods global supply chains, including product development, sourcing, manufacturing, quality, and sustainability. He's worked for big box retailers such as Carrefour in France, or Tesco and Morrisons or Sainsbury's in the UK. Most recently, he was EVP Global Sourcing and Manufacturing at US casual wear brand The Gap. Christophe's own consultancy, advisory, and interim leadership business, Big Ideas, helps brands and retailers to transform their end-to-end product supply chains and build integrated partnerships with strategic suppliers. At the same time, the consultancy is also helping vendors and manufacturers to diversify their production base into new country of origins and rethink strategically their approach to customers they want to work with. In this episode, Christophe will be discussing practical and actionable ways to create more resilient supply chains, how to balance the need for reliability with the quest for cheaper prices, and which technology developments are likely to make the biggest impact on supply chain resilience. Anyone who runs a successful business knows that having the right people in the right positions is key to surviving the tough times and also thriving when the market turns in your favor. However, finding those people is not as easy as it seems. This is why leading international companies turn to AsiaNet consultants. I've seen how they've helped clients with some very strategic hires that have helped their companies succeed in some really challenging markets. You can learn more about AsiaNet consultants over at their website at asianetconsultants.com. I'll also leave a link in the show notes. Meanwhile, let's sit down with Christophe and find out how we can build that all-important resiliency into our global supply chains. I'm very happy that you're able to join us here on A Seat at the Table. I think there's so much interest around supply chains, having gone through the pandemic where everybody's supply chain was thrown into chaos, so many different impacts hitting supply chains. Now we've gotten to the point where at least logistics seems to have leveled off. But of course, there's always some new thing that we have to be aware of. If you were building your ideal supply chain, and assuming that you're exporting, or should I say importing, into either Europe or the US as parameters, what would that look like?
Well, it's a really very interesting question, Jen, because we are witnessing two trends in the market these days. I should say two different options, retailers are taking. The first trend or the first option is where retailers decide to outsource or externalize part or the whole of their sourcing functions to companies engaged in the what I will call the trading of ready-to-wear garments, if you're talking about apparel. So these companies, they are, I will call it the reminiscence of what we knew, the old tradings we all remember, but they have massively evolved, providing full services such as product development, production, quality control, and even often design, delivering full collection for each season to a buyer and managing all their supply chain complexity. So they are taking these trading companies or the new trading company, they are taking out pain points and delivering, real full service, most of the time customized to the retailer they are serving. And of course, this against a fee, right? So very often, these trading companies even have taken some of the retailers' team, being made redundant when the retailers or the brands have decided to externalize their sourcing function. So the best in class of these trading platforms, they have real focus on product, on manufacturing, and they have also developed strong capabilities in areas such as, sustainability, transparency, which they were massively lacking in the past. And they have a very good understanding of trends and what customer wants. And they also have access to a wide range of manufacturers through the network they have developed and the volumes, they are placing. So this is the option one. The option one is you externalize, the full function. So the question is, why would you choose this option, right? If you are a retailer of a brand. Well, I think you choose this option because you see supply chain as complex. You see supply chain as an area where you do not want to invest in capabilities, in talents, or just put capital in it, because, you are uncertain about the future. You foresee lots of disruptions, starting with the most obvious one, these days coming from increasing geopolitical tensions. And you may have been badly bruised, with bad or lack of supply during COVID. So you don't know in which country to set up your offices. You don't know from which origin your goods should come from. And as a consequence, you decide to contract with a company that has developed competencies you do not have. And as this company, these trading companies, to do the job for you. To give you an analogy, it's like transportation. Everybody externalizes this function to shipping lines or freight forwarders, right? So you see the same emerging for sourcing and supply chain. So this could be this one option, option one.
So in other words, what you're saying is that you would move from having your own staff to, at least in certain cases, working with perhaps a third party buying office or agent.
Yeah. So the question is, if you start from scratch, right? If you start from scratch, you have two options. Or you externalize to these trading platforms, which are massively evolved. Okay. And the second option is you do it yourself. Okay. If you start from scratch, which is your question. If you do it yourself, it's going to be hard work. It's going to take some time. It's not impossible. It's definitely not impossible, but it will have to be part of the strategic intent of the company. The decision needs to come out of the boardroom. Global supply chain challenges and opportunities need to be understood by the board members and the executive committee and be, a strategic part of the company. As well as having strong support at all levels in the business. So if you do it yourself, if you do it in-house, courage, long-term strategic views and commitment are very key. I'm seeing these days many companies deciding to develop a new function or new business, and 6 months or less later, they're just putting out the plug. So, in-house resources, if you do it by yourself, they'll definitely give you more direct control over the day-to-day operation, a better fit, with the company culture, more product exclusivity. You can tap deeper into your supplier's capability. But again, it needs to be an integral part of your company strategy to succeed, So once you've passed this validation point, the next question is how to do it, right? But we don't have enough time, unfortunately, to go into details. But just to give you very, very high level, and you start with the end in mind, right? What do you want to get from this sourcing function? So definitely great products in train, reaching your stores or online platform and your customers, reasonably priced, ethically traded, and where you have full transparency to all components, that constitute the product. So you need to be fast, reliable, agile, ethical, resilient. And the starting point is the product, right? This is the common denominator. And this product has to be made by someone, somewhere. So you need to start by choosing your suppliers, and choosing your suppliers very carefully. and vet them on, their mindset, their capabilities, with the ambition to foster a strategic integration with them. The fewer vendors you have, the better it is. And then you look at product development technology. If you start from scratch, you want to ensure that products are developed digitally, to speed up, the product development phase. As much as possible, you will try to plug your designers into your strategic suppliers and avoid, intermediation or double handling. And then you would invest in production management, data system, predictive analytics, to rely on decision-making algorithm tools to help you focus your teams on identifying issues before they become problems. And then you will invest, your own capability and probably your own teams in, visibility, traceability, process, tools, technology, to know what is in your products, where the raw materials coming from, how much water you're using in your fabric, the type of chemical you're using, the carbon footprint of your supply chain, And you may also decide to outsource some function. For example, you can easily and reliably outsource part or the whole of your quality control these days, to companies that have resources, capability to do it better than you do it yourself. So again, the same focus on what it is you want to do in-house and where you prefer to partner or outsource to be better and to be faster.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that you're right. It's become too difficult, too complex to be able to do everything in-house for just about any brand. You really need to be able to, at least to some extent, work with external parties, third-party providers. So I think that's an interesting insight.
If you were doing from scratch, right, you would have two options, because you'll have nothing. You say, okay, or I outsource, or I do it myself. And even if you do it yourself, which will take more time, more effort, but strategically will position the company differently in working, with suppliers, which we may discuss later on, and develop strategic partnership. You may want to externalize some of the functions, right? If today you already have an existing setup, you need to rethink it, a lot. You need to transform it because many of the sourcing organizations today, they're still working the same way they were working before, right? Positioning themselves between the buying teams or the merchants in their retail country and the vendors. So the same mindset applies as well on what you want to do by yourself, where you are creating a competitive advantage versus where you need to partner to get faster and be better at what you're doing. So the same would apply whether you start from scratch or you need to transform an existing setup.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. Now, one of the key things that people are trying to address is supply chain resiliency. Again, touching back on everything that went down during the pandemic, I think people are prioritizing that a bit more than perhaps they were. What's your take on how companies can do that in a way that's practical and actionable? Because oftentimes things look good on paper, right? But when you try to execute on them, it doesn't always work out that well. We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yeah, well, let's start by, resilience. Resilience is the capacity or the capability to recover quickly from setbacks or difficulties. This is the ability to recover, right? This is not, I'm going to avoid any crises. It's how do you react very fast to a crisis so that you can restart, very, very quickly. So that I think that's important to make sure that your audience understand what do we mean by resilience. So definitely, COVID has significantly disrupted global supply chains. Nothing of this magnitude happened in decades. So it's on everybody's agenda to restore supply chain reliability and efficiency, because the old model, which was highly efficient, has shown its limitation. So you see these days very, very few best-in-class companies working hard to remodel their supply chains. And the majority, unfortunately, the majority of businesses, they're happy to see the world reopening. And for me, they're making the big mistake to believe, oh, it's going to go back to where we were before the pandemic. Or they understand something needs to change, but they don't know what to change or where to start. So again, it's a very big topic, so very high level. And again, there is no short-term recipe or magic wand, here for resiliency. But that's 4 or 5 things I would do. Start by creating an inventory and understand what I would call the choke points or the vulnerabilities of your existing supply chains. They have been highlighted by the latest events, the last 2 or 3 years. So start by doing an inventory. Where are your choke points? Where are the vulnerability of your existing supply chain? Where do you have too many eggs in the same basket? What is it you don't know? You should know. Start with the as-is. That will be the starting point. The second one is work hard to streamline, to reduce, streamline and reduce the number of moving parts of interaction in your current supply chain. Reduce your vendor base, invest in strategic integration, put more business with your vendors that have multiple geographies. They have a shared approach, to risk with you. The third point is map the supply chain of your products and partner to simplify this supply chain of your products. The fewer, the better here again. Where is your raw material coming from? If you use a lot of cotton, where is your cotton coming from? This industry is very fragmented. So the more you can reduce the number of interaction, the better you will be in building resilience, if something goes wrong. So partner to know where is your material coming from. Partner with your mills, that's to give you more visibility. Go deeper into understanding the various tiers of your product supply chain. Then I would say invest in technology. Build what you hear today. Build a supply chain control tower. Some call it a nerve center, for your supply chain. Data, process, technology are key here. All your supply chain data should come from one repository, not in multiple spreadsheets. I've seen it in action in other industry. It works. Mostly it's a room, with many screens where your supply chain is piloted from. It enables everybody in the company to know where everything is at any given time. It's going to take time, but unless you start building this control tower or this nerve center, you're never going to get, any better. And then if you have this type of technology, and the more you will build, your data and clean state data, then you can create what is called today, a digital twin of your supply chain. You digitally copy your setup, and then you start to simulate crises. You start to simulate disaster, and you see how your supply chain resists. Of course, it's all fake. You just simulate it as your real supply chain continues to work. But because you've digitized it, you can apply all type of crises, another COVID, a geopolitical disruption somewhere, and then you can see how your supply chain resists to the test, you are putting in the system. And then you apply the learning, and you reconfigure the real supply chain, having used a digital one to test and see how it reacts, So that will be my 5 points, Some are very short term, You need to know where you have your choke points. You need to reduce, your number of moving parts of interaction. You need to map the supply chain of your products. What is in your products, where it's coming from. Again, you partner with suppliers which are going to supply, cotton, knowing where it's coming from, for example. And then invest in technology. Technology is the future. I know it's some people and some companies are frightened because they don't understand it, but digital technology is a way forward. So create a control tower, start little, but build the data, accumulate the data, extract the data from your vendors, be clear about all these processes. And then you can simulate, the next disruptions, and then learn from that and apply the learning in your current supply chain.
I think that's really interesting. And I think that you're absolutely right about the importance of trying to implement technology to be able to better see what's happening in the supply chain. I mean, certainly digital twins is a concept, as you pointed out, that's been around in other industries, started out right in heavy industry and engineering, and it hasn't really been adapted, or I should say adopted, into light industry as much, but it looks like it's coming. Now, if you're looking at technology, of which there's a tremendous amount of technology available, everything from design capabilities, as you say, through to managing where your product is in the supply chain. Where do you see weaknesses? What technology do we need to develop or to adapt for the apparel sector?
Well, I see big progress has been made with digital product creation. But when I talk to my colleagues, to people who work in the apparel fashion, there's always, a reluctance to adapt this technology, coming from mostly from designers working the old-fashioned way. COVID has pushed the use of this digital product creation technology. I think they are the future. They are extremely powerful platform, because as the technology will expand, they will also morph as well, not only into product creation, but also into instant costing tools. As you are creating your products, the machine, the tools will tell you, your fabric consumption, how much it's costing, the trims you are using, the type of complexity you're applying to the products for the manufacturing, and all this will be costed immediately. So not only will you, design a very fashionable product that your customers would love, but you can also, on the design board, design for cost, design for a purpose, design for costing, which is also a very important point these days, because, and hopefully we'll have time to talk about it. I think this is the end of cheap. What the last 3 years have demonstrated as well is looking for the cheapest product that will never reach your stores or your online platform and your customers doesn't generate any business, right? So if it's cheap and if it's not in front of customer, the business, the turnover it generates is zero. So the more you can integrate the technology and understand not only at which state it is today, but how it's going to develop in the foreseeable future and in the near future, the more you will be part of the winning company. So digital product creation, definitely for me, it's a must. It reduces time, enable you to go extremely fast, and it connects your designers with your best vendors, and it also enables the sourcing function to move away from product development and refocus on, more important tasks. We talk about, visibility, transparency, traceability. That's are very, very important for the future. Looking at, manufacturing excellence, looking at new technology innovation. So digital product creation enable you to connect, faster your vendors with your designers. We talk about the importance of data. For me, this technology is critical, hyper critical. You can't manage with spreadsheet anymore. it's becoming too complex, and the machine needs to help the human to make decision and focus on, as I say, where disruptions may emerge from your supply chain. There's also a lot of technology emerging, but it's more on the manufacturing side, Jen. Technology to get better fits for online customers, to reduce return that cost a fortunes to retailers and frustrate the customers. Technology applied to manufacturing to identify fiber provenance, to identify a harmful substance in fabric, using technology developed in other industry like the beauty or the pharmaceutical industry. All the waterless dyeing techniques, all the technology to use less or no water. This is also critical when you see the impact of climate change, right? And the impact it can have on the fashion industry, which is using a lot of water. So not only waterless dyeing techniques, but also how can you grow cotton with less water and maybe with no water, new material, whether it's, thermal, moisture management, functional fibers, smart garments. There's so much happening with technology in the apparel and fashion industry these years, not only on the way you manage your supply chain, but also in the manufacturing and the making of the product.
Yeah, that's very true. It's interesting to see how much technology has come out, like you say, from the big push to make things more sustainable, more traceable, more transparent. Sometimes we're not aware of some of that. And like you say, pulling from other industries is important because we don't always have to redevelop the wheel, so to speak, ourselves.
Yeah, and for me, this is the exciting part of what I call the new sourcing, right? Which is less of what sourcing businesses or functions have done traditionally, and refocus on looking at this new technology, going deeper into the manufacturing side, understanding what machine and technology can provide. Invest a lot of time into this transparency, visibility, streamlining your supply chain, simplifying the number of moving parts. This is the exciting part of the future of sourcing, rather than just being, the intermediary function between the buyers and the vendors. Everything that can be done direct, let it be do direct and done direct between the vendors and the buyers, and refocus on where real added value is added, and definitely not in checking the checker or doing things somebody else can do in the supply chain. That's why also partnering with strategic vendors or developing strategic integration with vendors, for me, it's a way forward. It's really the way forward. I don't know if we'll have time to discuss about this topic today, but for me, this is, apart from technology, the how to get to a better supply chain and a faster supply chain.
It's a good point that you brought up, because I think one of the conundrums, particularly in the apparel sector, is that on the one hand, like you're saying, there is a case for having a certain number of suppliers who you partner with, who you become almost seamlessly integrated with. And yet at the same time, everybody wants to get a better price, right? That's a common part of business, is trying to reduce your cost by finding cheaper prices. And in the apparel sector, it's facilitated by the fact that you have a proliferation of vendors, and at the same time, there seems to be an ongoing consolidation of buyers. So it makes it easy, it makes it tempting, right, for a brand to be able to switch around amongst vendors. I mean, how do you see that playing out?
Well, going back to the point we made before, for probably for as long as I work in consumer goods supply chains, cost has always been the key factor to make decisions. As I said before, many companies were putting and happy to put all their eggs in one basket because they fundamentally believe the basket would never break down, right? And COVID has not only made the basket explode and has broken all the eggs. So the real question is, how much money you make from, as I said before, how much money you make, with a cheap product that never reach, your store, your online platform, your customers, the answer is easy, zero. So always looking at the cheapest option today, it's a suicidal mission. You need to look for the most cost-effective one. So I strongly believe, and more than ever before, that this is the one message COVID has given us, loud and clear. This is the end of cheap. I don't say cost is not important, but it is cost efficiency which should prevail this day. What do I pay for what I have? And I do believe one of the major strategy for resilience and efficiency and cost efficiency is to create this long-term strategic partnership and integration with key vendors. And many companies or brands are going to realize quickly that we are moving from a buyer's market, what you were explaining, to a seller's market. And this is now the vendors that are choosing the brands or the retailers they want to work with rather than the opposite. For decades, retailers were choosing their vendors. They were changing, for a reason or another. Most of the time it was cost. Sometimes it was for the performance. This is changing, this is changing for the best vendors. What I mean by this is, you have various categories of vendors. Your best vendors, they are not considering themselves as what I call order takers anymore. They are positioning themselves as solution providers. I say the base vendors, right? There are not thousands of these vendors around. These vendors tend to pick their customers. You, as a buyer or business partner, you need to be attractive to these suppliers. These suppliers are the ones that are investing in design capabilities. They can help you co-create products. They are the ones that have factories in more than one geography, helping with risk and resilience. They continuously invest in new machineries, new technology, product innovation. They treat their workers well. They're passionate about ESG, sustainability, transparency, carbon footprint reduction. They're doing the right thing for their people and for the planet. Some even have, product development centers in main retail countries close to designers and buyers. They have logistic facilities to distribute products to stores or distribution vendors. So with these vendors, you really want to develop, integrated partnership. You want them to have, I'm stealing the title of your podcast here, Jen. You want them to have a seat at your table. And you want to have a seat at their table. These vendors are the one you invite to help you find, the best solutions to your major projects, to your major problems. They also recruit great talents. The big vendors, the great vendors, have great people, and they can allocate these great people to your business accounts. So all this inventory of services and investment I just mentioned, you don't have to make them yourself if your vendors provide them, to you as part of the service. And you can reallocate your own resources on doing something else, what we've discussed before, while your trusted vendors, your trusted suppliers are empowered to deliver on some segment of your supply chain. So your strategic vendor, they know their stuff. If you spend your resources checking them, you miss a point, you miss the opportunity to redirect your capital towards very important tasks, such as, the sustainability, the transparency, the innovation, the manufacturing innovation, the product innovation. So each vendors in your vendor base should be here for a reason. And the reason is not because they've been here forever. The reason is not because they are cheap, They need to be here for a specific reason. Many companies consider they have strategic vendors because the vendors have been here forever. I totally disagree. This is not a strategic vendor. A strategic vendor should be definitely strategically integrated in your supply chain, and very, very few companies have achieved, this integration so far. Because you need to think differently. You need to approach your business differently. You need to approach your business long-term and you need to be able to extract the values of all the services your vendors are offering you or able to offer you. So it necessitates a shift in the approach on how you manage products, how you manage the supply chain end to end, and how you strategize together to get a bigger share of the market.
That's a really interesting point, that you would work with the vendor to strategize together to see how you can get a bigger market share. I've really never heard anybody bring that up before, never mind articulate it as you have.
Well, I believe, and I said that for many years, that in the modern retail world, it's not only, your brand, your stores, your design, your website, your online platform, that compete with the other brands. Supply chains compete with supply chains. Okay, if you understand that, that you need strategically, if you are on the executive committee, if you are a board member, to consider the supply chain as an integral part of your competitive advantage, then you get it. If you see supply chain that's something very opaque, like a black box, and don't invest time, don't invest money, don't invest technology, understanding it's a continuum, your products will be as good as your supply chain is good. You will be as competitive as your supply chain can compete with one of your major competitors. Your vendors are a critical part of that. You don't have, as I say, you don't have thousands of great vendors with great capabilities. You have, maybe 100 of them maximum. So if you are partnering with them strategically, you prevent them to partner strategically with your competitors. And that you create your own supply chain that works for your strategy, but it has to be fully integrated strategically end to end, Jen, if you want to succeed. Otherwise, you'd never be as great as you can be. So supply chains compete with supply chains. I've been saying that forever, and these days you see it, coming through, very, very seriously.
I think you're right. I think that is the long-term vision. It seems that companies, though, and I'm not saying this in a blaming kind of a way, but it's difficult when you see, companies like Shein, for example, who are able to do things at a rock bottom price and drive up a valuation of, what is it, $100 billion or something, something astronomical. I suppose that it's difficult for companies looking at that to not question whether they should be pursuing a similar model.
Yes, you can. But when you say, okay, let's look at transparency, how transparent is a Shein supply chain? What are they doing for people and the planet? What is the let's open the box. It's very opaque, and
Right.
that's going to be the limitation. Companies take a lot of time to realize that even if customers are not asking you to do it, you have to do it because it's part of your purpose to exist, to make sure that, you need to be proud of your supply chain as much as you can be proud of your products. You can't be proud of a product if you are exploiting people, or if your supply chain is not, the best it could be, and recognizing very honestly what you know and what you don't know, and working hard to go fix what you don't know. I think Shein is good. They make cheap money, quick money. They are extremely fast, that's for sure, but extremely opaque in how products are made and where products are made. And I think they'll have to learn fast and pivot very, very fast if they want to be successful on the long term, rather than making, quick money and then disappear.
Right. It sounds to me from what you're saying that there may be a sweet spot coming in for brands that will start to populate that sort of mid-tier, because certainly we know luxury is doing very, very well, but that's in its own world. And we're seeing the success that the cheapest of the cheap are achieving. But there's always been that struggle for the middle. So perhaps there is an opening now for brands to come in that are competing on something beyond either price or luxury. What's your take?
Yeah, I believe, the segmentation, the good, better, best exists in a product range, definitely will exist more in the retailers and what they have to offer to customers. And as customer will evolve, and you'll see, more and more customers asking for more transparency. It's not there yet, but you see it emerging and it's going to amplify. I think the one that start early are going to be the winners. Don't when you wait until your customers ask for something, it's too late. It's too late. So you need to go and read the trends, be prepared and be ready. So I think mid-terms or mid-sized brands who are willing to do the right thing, be very transparent, focus on, I say, people, planet, bring great products to the customers, educate the customers as well, but are fully transparent. I think they will be winning in the years to come for sure.
I think so too. I think we are definitely seeing a shift away from just chasing price. Not that you won't always have brands that are in that rock bottom category, but I think you're right. I think the consumer is starting to appreciate the value of a brand that offers quality in all the different ways that quality would be defined.
Yeah, and there's no shortcuts. In this business, there's no shortcut. There's no way. If you want to be here for the long game, if you want to be here for the long term, you need to do things right, and you need to do the right thing. It's difficult, and sometimes it's not always possible, but you need to recognize and be clear on where you don't have full transparency on your supply chain and what is it you are doing to gain full transparency. Not be lying to yourself and not be lying to your customers, but work hard to understand how you can get there, and again, it is hard work. It's hard work to have full visibility and full transparency on the fashion supply chain because it is so fragmented the way it is set up today. But it doesn't mean it's impossible because it's fragmented. You need to start somewhere. So if you show your goodwill and your intent and you are making progress, you will be rewarded by your customers for sure.
I think that's a very optimistic look, and I think it's good because people need that kind of inspiration, particularly at a time when it seems like we've just had years and years of ongoing challenges that have really, in a sense, exhausted people who are managing supply chain. So it's really, I think, invigorating to hear your point of view, Christophe.
And I think the young generation and the one coming soon, more and more, they will want to work for companies who have a noble purpose, right? Which is more than what they are selling. What is it they are trying to achieve? You start to see this emerging, but I think the generation coming, and the next one and the next after, what are companies here for, which is above selling products and making money for their shareholders, what is their noble purpose? Will also be an important, factor for the best of the crop to make their choice and what company they want to attract. And for companies to attract talent, they'll have to demonstrate a very, very strong, a noble purpose, their reason to do business. So I think yes, the earlier you start, the better it is, to position yourself.
Well, Christophe, thank you so much for joining us on A Seat at the Table today. It's really been very exhilarating to hear your views, and I'm looking forward now to see how the supply chain, particularly in the apparel sector, but not limited only to that, how it evolves. Quite interesting things that you've brought up. I think there's a lot for everyone to take away.
Thank you very much for inviting me again to your podcast, Jen. I know it's going from strength to strength. It's always great to have chat with you and hopefully, bring some food for thought to your audience and to your listeners. So again, a big thank you to you, and let's talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Christophe.